Welcome back, and now we go into Chapter 5, Photosynthesis. Here is the outline of this chapter. I will give you an overview of photosynthesis, and then talk about the light-dependent reactions, and then the Calvin cycle. Introduction. No matter how complex or advanced a machine, such as the latest cellular phone, who says cellular phone anymore? I guess I do. The device cannot function without energy. Living things, similar to machines, have many complex components. They too cannot do anything without energy, which is why humans and all other organisms must eat in some form or another. That may be common knowledge, but how many people realize that every bite of every meal ingested depends on the process of photosynthesis? Section 1. Overview of photosynthesis. By the end of this section, you will be able to summarize the process of photosynthesis, explain the relevance of photosynthesis to other living things, identify the reactants and products of photosynthesis, describe the main structures involved in photosynthesis. All living organisms on Earth consist of one or more cells. Each cell runs on the chemical energy found mainly in carbohydrate molecules, food, and the majority of these molecules are produced by one process, photosynthesis. Through photosynthesis, certain organisms convert solar energy, sunlight, into chemical energy, which is then used to build carbohydrate molecules. The energy used to hold these molecules together is released when an organism breaks down food. Cells then use this energy to perform work, such as cellular respiration. The energy that is harnessed from photosynthesis enters the ecosystems of our planet continuously and is transferred from one organism to another. Therefore, directly or indirectly, the process of photosynthesis provides most of the energy required by living things on Earth. Photosynthesis also results in the release of oxygen into the atmosphere, at least oxygenic photosynthesis. In short, to eat and breathe, humans depend almost entirely on the organisms that carry out photosynthesis. Solar dependence and food production. Some organisms can carry out photosynthesis, whereas others cannot. An autotroph is an organism that can produce its own food. The Greek roots of the word autotroph mean self, auto, feeder, troph. Plants are the best known autotrophs, but others exist, including certain types of bacteria and algae. Oceanic algae contribute enormous quantities of food and oxygen to global food chains. Plants are also photoautotrophs, a type of autotroph that uses sunlight and carbon from carbon dioxide to synthesize chemical energy in the form of carbohydrates. All organisms carrying out photosynthesis require sunlight. Heterotrophs are organisms incapable of photosynthesis that must therefore obtain energy and carbon from food by consuming other organisms. The Greek roots of the word heterotroph mean other, hetero, feeder, troph, meaning that their food comes from other organisms. Even if the food organism is another animal, this food traces its origin back to autotrophs and the process of photosynthesis. Humans are heterotrophs, as are all animals. Heterotrophs depend on autotrophs, either directly or indirectly. Deer and wolves are heterotrophs. A deer obtains energy by eating plants. A wolf eating a deer obtains energy that originally came from the plants eaten by that deer. The energy in the plant came from photosynthesis, and therefore it is the only autotroph in this example. Using this reasoning, all food eaten by humans also links back to autotrophs that carry out photosynthesis. Biology in action. Photosynthesis at the grocery store. Major grocery stores in the United States are organized into departments such as dairy, meat, produce, breads, cereals, and so forth. Each aisle contains hundreds, if not thousands, of different products for consumers to buy and consume. Although there is a large variety, each item links back to photosynthesis. Meat and dairy products link to photosynthesis because the animals were fed plant-based foods. The breads, cereals, and pastas come largely from grains, which are the seeds of photosynthetic plants. What about desserts and drinks? All of these products contain sugar. the basic carbohydrate molecule produced directly from photosynthesis. The photosynthesis connection applies to every meal and every food a person consumes. Main structures and summary of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis requires sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water as starting reactants. After the process is complete, photosynthesis releases oxygen and produces carbohydrate molecules, most commonly glucose. These sugar molecules contain the energy that living things need to survive. The complex reactions of photosynthesis can be summarized by the chemical equations shown here. Although the equation looks simple, the many steps that take place during photosynthesis are actually quite complex, as in the way that the reaction summarizing cellular respiration represented many individual reactions. Before leaving the details of how photoautotrophs turn sunlight into food, it is important to become familiar with the physical structures involved. In plants, photosynthesis takes place primarily in leaves, which consist of many layers of cells that have differentiated top and bottom sides. The process of photosynthesis occurs not on the surface layers of the leaf, but rather in a middle layer called the mesophyll. The gas exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen occur through small, regulated openings called stomata. In all autotrophic eukaryotes, photosynthesis takes place inside an organelle called a chloroplast. In plants, chloroplast-containing cells exist in the mesophyll. Chloroplasts have a double inner and outer membrane. Within the chloroplast is a third membrane that forms a stacked disc-shaped structure called thylakoids. Embedded in the thylakoid membrane are molecules of chlorophyll, a pigment, a molecule that absorbs light, through which the entire process of photosynthesis begins. Chlorophyll is responsible for the green color of plants. The thylakoid membrane encloses an internal space called the thylakoid space. Other types of pigments are also involved in photosynthesis, but chlorophyll is by far the most important. As shown in this figure, a stack of thylakoids is called a granum, and the space surrounding the granum is called stroma, not to be confused with stomata, the opening on the leaves. The two parts of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in two stages: the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. In the light-dependent reactions, which take place in the thylakoid membrane, chlorophyll absorbs energy from sunlight and then converts it into chemical energy with the use of water. The light-dependent reactions release oxygen from the hydrolysis of water as a byproduct. In the Calvin cycle, which takes place in the stroma, the chemical energy derived from the light-dependent reactions drives both the capture of carbon and carbon dioxide molecules and the subsequent assembly of sugar molecules. The two reactions use carrier molecules to transport the energy from one to the other. The carriers that move energy from the light-dependent reactions to the Calvin cycle reactions can be thought of as full because they bring energy. After the energy is released, the empty energy carriers return to the light-dependent reactions to obtain more energy. And that's the end of Section 1. Join me next time for Section 2, the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis. Until then.